Can Hockey Canada survive, or should it? Hi, I'm Brian Lilley, political columnist with the Toronto Sun, joined by sports columnist Scott Stinson, because Scott, we're all just taken up by this controversy that's been going on for the last several weeks now surrounding Hockey Canada, allegations of sexual assault by several, as many as 8 players on the 2018 World Junior Hockey team at a Hockey Canada gala. We've been seeing the testimony before the House of Commons as MPs try and figure out what went on. Did the federal government know anything? But a big question now is Hockey Canada. Scott Smith, the CEO, he went before the Commons and said, no, I'm not going anywhere. Sheldon Kennedy said he's got to resign. The women's national team said he's got to resign. Several MPs said he's got to resign. You've covered this a lot longer and in more depth than I have. Where do you think he goes, or does he go?
Look, he's been, frankly, shockingly resistant to resigning, partly because, they've lost funding all over the place. Corporate sponsors have fled. The government has frozen their funding. In almost any other business you can imagine, if you were in this kind of a scandal, the leadership would leave just to turn the page and say, okay, now we've got fresh leadership in. Then the people like, your SOs and your Tim Hortons and your Canadian Tires who've pulled funding can now sort of go back and say, well, we're glad to see something happen, and we'll start, basically giving you money again, because they want to be associated with too. But my guess is they probably feel they won't do that until they're convinced that there's
Well,
been some major change at the top. So we'll see.
who wants to be associated with an organization that used money from little kids' minor hockey fees to pay people hush money and sexual assault allegations? Look, I know like that $7.6 million number is out there, and more than half of that's historic stuff from Graham
Yep.
James.
Yep.
We didn't know where the money came from, but we knew that payments had been made to victims of Graham James.
Yes.
But that total 7.6 million, and the fact that it's still happening, that is shocking. And so, yeah, who wants to say, I'm a proud sponsor of these cover-up hush money guys? Like, yeah, but, if you're one of the big banks or SO or what have you, you're running for the hills.
Yeah, and I think the other part, as addition to what happens with Hockey Canada, will be to see whether the larger system of junior hockey in this country changes. Because one of the things we've seen, and there was some discussion of it before the committee today, was these are teenage boys who essentially get drafted into a junior elite system, and then they get sent far from home. In many cases, far from home. They live with people who aren't their parents. Sometimes they're in small towns where it's them and a bunch of other hockey players who are like local heroes. It's like not hard to imagine that they could get up to some problematic behavior in that environment. And is it possible that one of the reforms, or one of the many reforms we might see, would be a sort of a wholesale change of the way the system works? Maybe guys who are potentially going to be professional millionaire hockey players, maybe the best thing to do for them is not to send them a long way from home and have them live outside of parental guidance and all that stuff. So it'll be
It's the
interesting to
only
see whether
sports
that
league that
changes
does
too.
it that way.
It is. It really
It,
is. So, and it's just because it's always been done that way, right? Like that's sort of the explanation for it now.
Yeah, I mean, it worked at one point. If you look at the draft results, I'm not sure that it does now with so few Canadians in the first round.
Right.
But that's beside the point. It's not working on that front. It's not working on the side of these allegations, which unfortunately there's been too many of them. So does Hockey Canada, though? I mean, it was set up to improve the sport, to improve
Yeah.
Canada's performance
Yeah.
at the national level. You can argue that, yeah, especially at the World Juniors, but this tarnishes all of that success. What happened in June 2018 in a downtown London hotel, this tarnishes it. So is it better to reform the organization, get rid of people like Scott Smith and those around him, people who've been in this organization for 10, 20, 30 years, or and just replace them with somebody new? Or do you just take it down to the studs and rebuild?
I think there's going to be a push to do just that. We'll see whether the parties who are motivated to make the change are in a position to make it happen. Obviously, part of the thing with Hockey Canada is it is an old boys club. These people have been there a long time. Whether outside pressures will force them to have major institutional change, I guess we'll see. But sort of to your point about, yes, it's been successful, but I think there's an argument to be made that almost any group of people who are involved with sports leadership could take a country like Canada, where so many kids play hockey, and produce relatively decent results if they, really set their minds to it. I mean, I think we see countries like Finland, which have a tiny amount of players who play hockey. They've been very successful internationally. Sweden's been very successful.
Hmm.
We're very good relative to the United States because of our population differences, but I don't think the performance of Hockey Canada has been so mind-blowingly awesome that you can say, well, you can't touch these guys. Like their results speak for themselves. No, they're good results, but I think it's entirely possible that a different group of people could have attained something similar and
Yeah,
maybe not had this horrible cover-up type situation happen.
I've heard from people who've worked in this department, worked in government, that Hockey Canada was never easy for government to deal with because government was not a big funder, so they didn't care. Um, you mentioned the corporate sponsors leaving. Uh, the government's taken their funding away, and before they would have just said, "I don't care, we got this other funding." You're not going to have the corporate funding. You're not going to have the government funding. You're probably going to start seeing resistance this coming season from leagues wanting, I don't want to send the money up for your hush fund. So, I mean, that I think is where it crumbles, and I think they do need to come down to the bare basics.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as like we're in the middle of summer now, right? It's not really hockey season. So I think as we get closer to the fall and as more of these conversations are happening and the tournaments are happening, there's a World Junior tournament happening next month. I think as these things happen and the normal business of hockey starts to resume, I think that's when you might see some of the real calls for change happen.
All right, Scott, thanks so much for your time and your views. We'll put it to the audience now. Let us know what you think. Drop a comment down below. Share this on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.